So, welcome to For Better, For Worse, and Real Estate. And this is going to be our new podcast between myself and my husband. So, I'm your host, Makeda,
I'm Taiwan.
and we've been married for about 27 years now. And so, you're going to hear a lot of what it took for us to be able to get to 27 years, and then also the for better of it, the worst of it, the business side, and the real estate side. So, let's get right into it.
Well, I'll like to start off by saying it's not about 27 years. It's 27 years, 28 years this year.
Oh,
So we are
okay.
we are right there.
Wow. Okay, bad wife. So 28 years. That's a long time. That's almost 30 years. How you feel about that?
We're 2 years away from it. I'm excited about it. We have another milestone that we're about to hit. We weren't able to celebrate the 25 years due to COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to talk
So
about that?
yeah, I guess there wasn't expected to talk about, but let's get right into it. So this is the for worse. Like the for worse of being married
I
and
agree.
yeah, being in a relationship because we took a for worse when I got sick with COVID the summer of 2021. Now it feels like a days. But I had COVID in 2021 and I thought that it was going to be something simple, but turns out 2 weeks later, my husband had to take me to the hospital and I ended up staying there for almost a month and almost didn't make it out. And so you want to talk about what that was like for you?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's not something that you ever want to have to share or even talk about. I remember the day we went to one of those quick clinics. I forget what they call it, a minute clinic or something like that. I don't. Hopefully, that's not a brand name, but it was one of those types of places. We went in there. She was tested. She got up out of her off the bed and she started walking around saying, "You don't know anything, Taiwan." It was very funny that day. But we got home because she tested positive, and so we ended up going home. She wasn't feeling well. So happened that I get off. I was working from home. Um, I was on meetings all that day. Walked into the room back and forth. Never noticed that she was still in the bed. And at the end of my day, at about 4:30, I come into the room and she's still laying in the bed, and I realize that she's actually in the bed. And at that point, we knew that something was wrong. Next day, and she refused to go to the hospital. So the next day, same thing, followed almost exactly the same day. I realized when I was talking to her, she kept trying to say something, and she repeated herself about 4 times. And at that point, we called, and we did a teledoc or something like
Yeah.
that. He asked us to take a look at her oxygen. So happened we had the device, and she had a really low reading. They told us to stop what we were doing and get her into the hospital. And from that day, it changed. Everything
Yeah,
changed.
and I didn't know you said I was repeating myself, so that was because of the lack of oxygen, and I didn't know why I was doing some of the things that I was doing. I didn't even know why I was out of breath. I didn't know that COVID was affecting people's lungs in the way that it was. Why my chest was so tight, why I could barely make it down the stairs or even make it to walk to the car to go to the emergency room because I didn't realize how bad COVID attacked your lungs. And then going into the hospital, learning about how I had not only COVID, but double pneumonia in both lungs as well. And so that's when I was in the hospital and I wasn't able to see my husband. I want to say for about 2 weeks because they wouldn't let you in, to the hospital. So I really had to go through that entire process alone, depending on, nurses coming in and also my son who was coming to the hospital, but he couldn't even come into the room. He had to wait outside, but my husband wasn't allowed to come into the hospital with me.
Yeah, it was one of those things that, you have the quarantine period. So we had to go through that part. I had been with her for about a week already while she had COVID. I never tested positive for COVID. I think you got COVID twice
Yeah.
over this length of time, but I never tested positive. My family got COVID. I may have had COVID and just asymptomatic, but who knows? By the grace of God, He kept me healthy enough to be able to take care of her and serve her. Um, in that time, we were able to actually see each other and talk to each other in those 2 weeks that you were isolated. It was just through FaceTime. You couldn't really speak.
Yeah.
And I know you forgot a lot of what was going on, but you were coherent. It was just that, you had a lot of struggles. So
Yeah.
why don't you share some of the backdrop of what was
Yeah.
going on in the background of the hospital while we weren't there,
Yeah.
and how we had to kind of get involved, and the reason why you always want to make sure that your loved ones, and this is for the better or worse, right? Because the better part is that spouse that you have is going to back you up in everything that you need them for when the chips are down. And so the chips were down for you. So talk about what we had to do in order to make sure that you had the excellent care that you needed.
Yeah, so we were in a hospital in the suburb of Chicago. We won't name the hospital, but just being in the hospital by myself without my family was something I wasn't used to, and especially staying that long of a period of time. And then, having, I forget what they call it, but the machine in my nose and my nose burning and the machine running out of water. And like even calling the nurses and how they weren't coming into the room because a lot of them, frankly, didn't want to put on their suits to have to come in the room to be able to treat me. I had male nurses to treat me better than the female nurses that were at the actual hospital. And so that was kind of surprising too, just being a woman myself and how we cater, to other women and cater to people in general. But I had male nurses that would suit up, and the minute that I rung the bell to see what it is that I was going through. But even having like the doctors to come in to tell me, you know what, Makeda, if you don't do this, if you don't turn on your stomach, you're going to die. And like telling a patient that is laying in the hospital fighting for their life, their family is not there to fight with them, and then having the lung doctor to come in to repeat what the respiratory doctor said and letting me know that he's right, if you don't do what we're telling you to do, you're going to die. And it's like, how many people did they kill in the hospital over these years? I started immediately thinking about everyone that actually took those words and they died in the hospital because they believe what the doctor told them about themselves. And then also sometimes if you let that get in your spirit, you start to believe it and you just completely give up. And I thought about those people as well.
Yeah, why don't you clarify that, because I want the listeners to know exactly what you mean by kill, because it's such a strong word.
Yeah.
What is it that made you use the word kill?
Because a lot of people died, during COVID. And I even remember walking out of the hospital and having like survival guilt because so many people around me were dying from COVID, and for me to be able to survive it and make it out of it. And I kept asking God, like, why me? Because I could have died. I could have gave up. And the reason why I use the word kill is because you can kill somebody with your words. Like you can kill somebody.
And that's where I wanted you to go.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I know that you are a spiritual woman and you understand the power in words.
Yeah.
So that's where I wanted you to go. So go ahead, finish.
Yeah, you can kill somebody with your words, telling them that they are no good, that they're going to die, and then them actually believing what it is that you're saying. It's bad enough that we have to fight what we tell ourselves about ourselves, but then having to fight what other people tell you about yourself. I think that that's two different things, but it also can kill your spirit, and so that's what I mean by that. But I again want to say how I thank God that I had my husband, because I remember him coming into the hospital room when they did allow him to come to the hospital, and him massaging my muscles and looking at how my muscles was like water. I didn't know that COVID not only attacked your lungs, but also attacked your muscles, that they were so weak that I could not walk. And so for me, being able to have someone with me who I had already been with for over 20 years, and for him to be able to see me in that condition and still care, love me, help me to get better. And really, I couldn't walk. I could barely talk. I couldn't really feed myself. And so I had to start over. And I didn't know as a grown woman that I would be back in that type of state. And so it was something, and we argued. So you talk about the for better or worse. Like, we also argued when I got back home because he kept pushing me, like, okay, make it to the bathroom, like, get up, take it slow, use the walker, don't use the walker. And I'm like, you do not know. Like he just said earlier, I was like, you don't know what you're talking about, Taiwan. I don't remember saying that. That's why I bust up laughing. But
I got it on video just so you know.
It sounds like me, but it sounds like me. But the fact that I told him that you don't know what this feels like. And so I felt defeated because I couldn't make it to the bathroom. I felt defeated because by the time I came from the bathroom to the couch, I would just literally just collapse and just cry. And it was very hard to put my thoughts into words to tell you what I was going through. I was just like, he don't understand like what I'm going through. But for him, he was like, you know, push, like fight. And he was telling me based on, were you telling me based on how you think that you would act, or were you telling me based on how you thought that I should do?
So coaching, right? You know, it's
coaching
doing the
in
things,
marriage, or what do you mean coaching?
Coaching.
I don't know what he mean by that, y'all.
So coaching is pushing someone to do something that they're unwilling to do. And so in order for you to get better, I had to be I don't want to say the stick, because we do, you know, I do believe in a carrot with you, but sometimes I have to be the stick. And at that moment, I had to be the stick. I needed you to get better, but I needed you to understand that you had it in you to get better. So your circumstances had you feeling one way, but what I believed in for you was what I was pushing you through. So that's the reason why I pushed you.
Okay, well. It didn't feel good at that time, and I guess it don't feel that great now.
Hard work is not easy.
It's not. So let's go fast forward. Well, let's go back. Because you and I, you said, been married for almost 28 years. We haven't had our anniversary just yet. But you and I both are in real estate. So the for better, for worse real estate, you and I both are in real estate. I got started in real estate in 2004, and it was because of you. I always tell people when they ask me in an interview, like, how did you get started? And I say my husband was the one who seen something in me to say, you know what, Makeda, I think you would make a good real estate agent. Now, I don't know what it is about me that he thought I would make a good real estate agent, but here I am 20 years later being a great real estate agent.
So can I explain that?
Yeah.
All right, so let me explain this, because I think it's an obvious one, right? Like, all your listeners, they know who you are. They know exactly who you are. You pull people in. So it is you who pulled me in through your words, right? Like, I saw you in action. I saw you in action outside of what you shared with me as a boyfriend at the time, right? And so seeing you away from me, just speaking directly to me, because I always told you you were a good listener, right? So it was those moments where I used to have to say to you, talking to you, speaking to you on the phone, hello? And you would say, no, I'm here. And you were listening. And then you would
until
pause.
28 years later.
Well, we'll get to that at some point in this way down the road. But you were such a good listener that you would pause to make sure that I was done, and then you would start speaking, regardless of what it was about. And so when I saw that you didn't just do this for me, it was just your character, it was who you were or are. I saw you in church speaking as an evangelist, a young evangelist speaking to people that were older than you, older than us.
Okay.
And you were speaking for people that were older than us. And so when I saw that and how you handled yourself, and me knowing that with my personality or my trait of being a, what do you call me?
Logical,
No,
overthinker.
Yeah, that too, but that's not what I was looking for. So, and I can't think of the personality trait, but anywho, I'm just more private.
Okay.
And so, and not a public speaker. So
Introvert.
That's what I was looking for.
Okay.
Yes. And so seeing you go up there to do something that I would never imagine me, doing, it just gave me fuel to be better by having you as an example.
Okay.
And so seeing that, I think that's what people find in you, is that you make other people better.
Okay.
You do the things or talk about the things that they only think about, but don't have anyone or have enough people behind them to push them to go after those dreams. And I think you do a really good job because you pivot. And sometimes this is something that I have to, deal with, but you are able to imagine yourself successfully in those positions or dreams for others. And then you can easily give or feed that information to those people and make them go after the dream, have a plan for the dream, and see the success at the end and how bigger it's going to be than the dream that they already have.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the reason why I got into real estate, based on him pushing me, as he used the word, coaching me to get into real estate. And so, for me, I started in 2004. I was excited about finally passing my exam, getting started with Century 21, 20 years ago. And really, this is the month that I celebrate my 20th year. It's also the month that we built our house. 20 years ago in Plainfield, we built our house, and we've been in our house for 20 years. Now we're looking to sell it and move around the world. But here we are 20 years later. And in doing so, in my real estate career, selling 7 properties my first time, and then moving into the REO business, which is real estate owned by the bank or owned by an entity. And me getting all of these listings that I got from the bank, I needed help. And so you came along and you got your managing broker license right out the door, because really, here in Illinois, we had this rule to where you could not get your managing broker license right out the gate, but you were able to do it before that rule took place, and you had it. You had something to say about that?
Yeah, I
Okay.
do. And the reason why is only because you skipped a step.
Okay.
I want to talk about my journey if we're going
Okay.
to talk about
Okay.
it. So my journey was actually to help support you. And the first thing that I did was we created the property management company. So we ended up servicing property preservation company. So we ended up serving some people that was in your area of business. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I ended up, because you were so overwhelmed. Well, I don't say overwhelmed.
Can we tell the people what property preservation means?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to jump into it, or you want me to do
tell.
it? Okay. So property preservation, it's about servicing more so a client that had assets that were possibly corporate owned. There's no one that can actually service those properties as an owner. So we became the owner. We would board, protect, maintain both the lawn, the property itself, and we would provide services, ongoing services. So if there were any break-ins or anything like that that caused a property to be a risk or a bad neighbor, the preservation company was there to rescue those companies, to keep those properties in good standing shape for the community, but also to be profitable when it was time to sell those properties. So preservation companies provide a lot to the communities and also to the businesses that they serve. And if it's something that you're interested in creating, she can definitely help you do that.
And I do want to talk about the monetary value of that, and then also just pivoting in business. And so for us, we went from selling traditional real estate to selling non-traditional real estate, meaning selling foreclosures in the marketplace, but also being able to look and see that we were hiring other companies and third-party companies to clean out and trash out properties, and we were writing them checks for like $5,000, $7,500 to come in to paint, to remove carpet and things like that, to clean up water when properties flooded. But we seen all of this money going out that we were paying, and I was like, wait a minute, like we're leaving money on the table. And so from us being in the foreclosure industry, we were able to create the property preservation company called Property Genie. Hint that we, clean the property.
That was a really good name.
Oh, but you know what, y'all? I didn't clean the property. I don't know if this is for better or for worse, but I refused to clean the property. And so Taiwan had to go out and find some hires. Can you talk about that process?
Well, I can. It's just like any other business, though. You need the proper staff, and I don't want to get too far off script because we were
Okay.
talking about kind of how the process went, and I was going down my storyline.
Uh-huh.
But let's save that one for another show because
Okay.
I think it's worthy of a full
Because we do
show.
have some,
Yeah,
yeah, squatters and
yeah, there's a lot
bathroom
that
and
goes on
yeah,
in that. So
yeah.
hopefully you'll tune in for that one.
Okay.
But after that and getting into the business and realizing how much of a struggle or it can be for REO agents, it made me realize how much you were pouring into your business, and I saw the support that you needed from that side of the business. So I ended up getting the agent license, which was I think they called it a sales agent license at that
I
time.
thought you got the broker license immediately.
No.
Okay.
So I had because there was a path that you had to go down at that time.
Okay.
So you had to be a agent first. So I got the agent license. And then when my time was up with that and we were deciding to move out of the office that we were under, that's when I got the managing broker's license.
Okay. Okay.
And then I opened up, and then you came over.
And I
And
just
then
want to
we went from
pause
there.
right here in the podcast to just let y'all know how your husband sometimes had to help you to remember things, and then vice versa, because he would swear up and down that what he's saying is the truth, and I will swear up and down that what I'm saying is the truth. And sometimes we have to kind of like just remember for each other, because I remembered it differently. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah. So that was the path. And again, that's where the support came in to get you, further down the line where you were at. And then you just, as you do, you skyrocketed. So
Yeah, and I would say that with me bringing my husband on, it allowed for both of us to sell like over 100 properties in 1 year each. And so that was the first time that we both experienced like our 6-figure year each, rather than like me taking on everything or you taking on everything. We were actually able to be a team for each
and it
other.
didn't take anything away from us, right? That partnership is not just at home. If you have a successful partnership at home, you can definitely have a successful partnership in business because you understand one another, right?
Yeah.
It didn't take away from us in our performance, in real estate. I think we ended up both becoming top producers for 3 years in a row. So, and that was individual numbers,
Yeah.
not the business, but the individual numbers on the agent.
Yeah.
So we did well, and we didn't pull away from each other. I know that you thought, and we were fair on the properties. Remember that we used to do 1-and-1. We didn't know what was coming down the pipeline,
Yeah.
and we would do 1-and-1.
Oh,
So
you say, so yeah.
if
Yeah.
you got a really good property,
Right. Sometimes, so what he means is that every time the bank would give us a listing, it was like, okay, it's your turn to take this listing. And then when the next one, it was my turn. But sometimes I would be hating because the property may be a better property, and I may have got what we call a junk property, and one that needed a whole bunch of work to it, or one that wasn't as high in value. And so like sometimes that can be like, oh, give me that. So that was one of the things that we battled with, but that was all in fun. Some of the other things that we want to get to get a chance to know Makeda and Taiwan, because a lot of you may see myself out there, but you don't necessarily get to see the man that is supporting and always has supported this woman here. Can you talk about that? Like, what is it like to support the going into like the for better or worse? But what is it like to support somebody who has this calling, like you say that I'm a dreamer, whereas you are the logical one, the one who is like, okay, well, do we have a blueprint for this? Do we have plans for this? Like, can you talk about that a little bit?
Whew, that's another show.
Well,
I'll be brief
we'll
on
dip
it,
our
but
toe
we
in
definitely
on the
need
first
to talk
show
about that, right?
Okay.
Like that is very important. All things that you do in life, you're going to see eye to eye on, or you're not going to see eye to eye on. It's a 50-50, right? It's always going to be something that you may or may not agree with. And what you don't agree with, you really have to find a way of sharing is talking about the disagreement. For me, my wife it takes quite a few conversations, and we'll get into that in another show. So, and she's very transparent. So whatever I say, she will share more than what I'm probably willing to share. Again, I am a private person. But I am willing to do this show because I think it's important for the people, and I think that it's going to help some folks out there, and especially in today's time, right? You know, we have a lot going on in the world, a lot of distractions. For me, I've always been about what does it serve, how does it serve my family, and not just my wife, you know. So we have 3 kids between us, 2 boys, 1 girl. We have a very loving family. But again, that came with hard work as well. And our kids needed to trust us and we needed to trust them. So we were very open with our kids and we set some foundations for them, and they understood that we were going to be there for them as we are for each other. So there is no wavering in any of that. We still do that today. In fact, I was just at a Bulls game last night with my daughter. And so it's just, you know, it's one of those things that we continue to pour into. And the dreamy part is just, you know, sometimes you have to give. Sometimes it may be financial. Sometimes it may be emotional. Sometimes it might be both. What I would say is that we will put that together for you all in the show. So stay tuned. There's a lot to talk about around that. There's probably going to be about 15 shows around that one. It's just, that's a big ask to speak in this intro. So
Okay.
yeah, let's talk about that later.
Okay. So so moving forward, I do want to talk about, now I wasn't sure if I should bring up our very first property that we bought that was a HUD home, or should I talk about the first investment property that we purchased together. But I think we probably should talk about the foreclosure property that we purchased, and how we won the bid on that, and what that process and everything was like with
the first house that we lived in.
Yeah, the busted
okay,
pipes
let's do
and-
that. Let's
okay.
because this is the real estate part, right?
Yeah.
So let's do the real estate part. So that's a good one to start off with.
Okay. So we purchased our first home together. I think it was in the year 2000. We had been married for 4 years, stayed in, I think, 2 apartments since we had got married in 96. 2000, you got approved for a long. Oh, let's talk about that.
Yeah,
Like
go
how
through
you
that
didn't
because
think that you could get approved until I said so.
All right, so on that one, and I really like to hear your voice, but I'll go ahead and talk about this one. So in that, it was one of those things that I was at work. I worked 6 days a week at this. No, I worked 6 days a week at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It was standard. So every time I would come home, you know, we had the baby at that time. Devin was the last. You know, he was the youngest, and he was still a baby. And you ended up making a phone call, giving out my social security number, and
Did you
having
say I
my
gave out your?
yes. We didn't even talk about it.
I just want to pause. I want to pause right here because my husband will always bring, in the 28 years of us being married, he has no idea how come I'm able to memorize his social security number. Like, how do I know his full social security number? And it was not something hard. And I think the wives out there can relate to knowing their husband's social security numbers. And so go ahead and go back to, I gave out your social security number.
So she gave out my social security number, and she ended up having my credit ran while I was at work. I had no idea. So I get home, and all I know is that we need to hurry up and leave because the loan officer wants to see us. And loan officer, who was that? And so she says, I called and they gave you a pre-approval, but they need to see you. Who gave me a pre-approval? And so we ended up going to see this loan officer way up north. We sat down with him. He ran some numbers by me. We got into the discussion of home buying and all. This is well before we're real estate agents. And so I've never purchased a home. The biggest purchase I've ever had at this point was a brand new car. And so now it was time to buy a home. And I wanted her to have a home. So I went through with everything. We ended up taking about 8 months looking for a home. And we finally found a home. It was a HUD home. We bid it on the home. We went over asking price.
Yeah.
Because we had been looking for a while.
It was multiple offers.
Yep, it was multiple offers, and we ended up getting the house for about $100,000. I think it was like $110,000.
Okay.
And After that, we ended up, I mean, it's the first home. I made pretty good money at that time. I think the house was only, $110,000. At that point, I was making like $55,000 a year.
Yeah, and I think the heat wasn't
And
on at that time when we
yeah,
purchased the house.
it was some issues with the
Yeah,
home, but the
and did we get an
financing piece,
inspection?
no, we didn't.
Okay.
But the financing piece, because I want them to understand, like
Okay.
the financing piece,
Okay.
because I did not have those types of large purchases, and like I said, I had a new car at one point, but at this point, the new car wasn't enough, and I didn't have enough. I didn't have credit cards or anything like that, so the interest rate was sky high. I think it was like 12%,
Okay.
something like that.
Okay.
And we had to put down 25% or 20% or something like
How can
that.
we put down all that money?
I worked every day. I worked 7 days a week at that point.
OMG.
Yeah, and so at this point, I was working as much as I possibly could before closing, and made a lot of money. And we spent every dime that we had to move into this place. So we had like
Wow.
$300 that we got back at the
Did
closing.
we borrow? Did we
No,
borrow
we never
any
borrowed
money?
We never borrowed any
Okay.
money.
So I was
Um,
working at Motorola.
You weren't working at this time, remember?
Okay.
Devin was a baby.